Good morning and welcome on this beautiful morning. Let's give voice to our spirits. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of light, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of light, come to me, come to me. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. Up above my head, I hear music in the air. I really do believe there is joy somewhere. Up above my head, there is trouble everywhere. Up above my head, there is trouble everywhere. Up above my head, there is trouble everywhere. I really do believe there is hope somewhere. Up above my head, there is justice in the air. Up above my head, there is justice in the air. Up above my head, there is justice in the air. I really do believe there is truth somewhere. Up above my head, there is sorrow in the air. Up above my head, there is sorrow in the air. Up above my head, there is sorrow in the air. I really do believe there is peace somewhere. Up above my head, I hear singing everywhere. Up above my head, I hear singing everywhere. Up above my head, I hear singing everywhere. I really do believe there is love somewhere.
Good morning and welcome everyone to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. This is a congregation in the free faith tradition, a community of youth, adults, and children, bound not by creed, but by covenant. I am Lori Wanker, your Board of Director President, and I use the pronouns she, her, hers. Other service participants today include Reverend Roger Birchhausen, Reverend Sarah Goodman, Carol Coet, Amy Peterson-Derrick, the White Bear Unitarian Universalist Choir, Holly Meyerding, and Russell Dietrich. Aaron Scott and Jack Gady are behind the scenes making everything possible this morning. At 11:15 today, we will gather live for our cyber social hour, a half hour of easy conversation in small facilitated groups. All are welcome. The link is in the chat box. Welcome to our church. Together, we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
The words of our call to worship today come from Reverend Rebecca Edmiston Lang. Come into this space, which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all of your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes, for here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into the space where we can heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into the space where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this space. Together, we make it holy space.
I'm lighting the chalice this morning with these words from Julianne Lepp. We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, of welcoming, of multiple truths. Please join me in our opening words. Love is the spirit of this church and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Hope you'll now join in singing our hymn, When We Are Gathered, number 359 in Singing the Living Tradition. Good morning.
This morning's story is a Buddhist tale called Two Teachers in Tea that we have shared together often. When we share stories like this over and over, it gives us an opportunity to experience it each time in a new way. So I invite you, whether this story is brand new to you or you have heard it 1,000 times, to take a breath and to notice how you experience this story this time. How does the story make you feel? What does it make you wonder? What is it calling you to do? Two Teachers in Tea, adapted from a telling by Sarah Conover. About a century and a half ago in Japan, there lived a Zen Buddhist teacher named Nanin. One day, a university professor came to call on Nanin at the temple because he wanted to learn more about Zen. Come in for some tea, said Nanin, leading the professor into the tea room. They sat across from each other at a small, bare table. For a long time, the old master sat in silence, perfectly at ease. Sometimes he gazed at the professor warmly. At other times, he gazed out the window at the beauty of the gardens. But the professor grew more and more uncomfortable with the prolonged silence. He squirmed and he tapped his fingers nervously. He looked around anxiously for the tea to arrive, until finally the professor found the silence to be unbearable. So he began to fill the silence by doing what he did best. The professor cleared his throat and began to recite a lecture on Buddhism that he had just given at the university. Well, the old master, Nanin, made a fine audience. He nodded in a friendly way at the professor's most outstanding points and seemed to have an unending look of curiosity. And so the professor kept right on talking. After a half hour, still no tea had arrived, but the professor was so wrapped up in his speech that he had completely forgotten about the tea and of the purpose for his visit. He was so consumed by his own lecture, in fact, that he didn't even notice when, at last, an attendant carried an elegant tray with a ceremonial teapot and 2 cups of tea for the 2 teachers. The professor lectured on while Nanin smiled and deliberately placed a teacup before his chattering guest, then slowly began to pour tea into the professor's cup. He poured and poured and poured and poured some more until the tea overflowed the cup, covering the table and spilled down onto the floor. Finally, this was enough to get the professor's attention. "What are you doing?" the professor sputtered. "Can't you see that there's no more room in this cup?" Nanin looked kindly at his visitor and replied, "Just like this cup, Professor, you too are overflowing. Let us first empty our cups, then together we can learn."
Join me now in a time of meditation, which some call prayer. Take a breath, find a comfortable place for your body, and take a moment to find your center. Imagine that thing that's been running through your mind like ticker tape, bring that idea of that thing into your head and honor its place within you. And for a moment, let it go. As you find a place of calm, take a short time to rest in that calm feeling. Now use that calm to reach out your heart and thoughts to lightly touch a tender spot beyond yourself. Bring to mind a loved one, be they suffering or celebrating, and hold them in your heart. Bring to mind a friend, a coworker, a fellow congregant here, maybe someone you know who's struggling or celebrating. Hold them in your heart. Now bring to mind someone you don't know very well. Maybe the panhandler on the street corner, maybe the clerk at the gas station, an elected official, a celebrity, someone you don't know how to care for. Hold them in your heart. Bring to mind the people around the world that you don't know, that you can't know, but who we do know are suffering. Bring to mind the folks of Haiti reeling from another massive earthquake. Bring to mind the people all over the world affected by COVID-19. Bring to mind the many parts of the world experiencing the effects of climate change, especially those that are experiencing wildfires, extreme temperatures, and rising sea levels. Hold them all in your hearts today and always. Amen.
Your financial gift to our congregation goes to support the programs we've come to rely on as anchors in our lives. Programs for youth and families, music, classes and small groups, justice work, and public witness, pastoral care, rites of passage, and Sunday services. You can contribute by offering today, by sending a check, or by following the easy prompt to give, text to give on your screen.
Let nothing upset you. Let nothing frighten you. Everything is changing. Only now is changeless. Patience attains the goal. Who has now lacks nothing. Now alone fills all needs. Let nothing upset you. Let nothing frighten you. Everything is changing, changing, changing.
Our reading this morning comes from Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, number 15. It is a translation by Stephen Mitchell. Simplicity, patience, compassion. These three are your greatest treasures. Simple in actions and thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate toward yourself, you reconcile all beings in the world.
Whose breath
I want to tell you this morning about Dottie Matthews, a beloved colleague and friend. She served as an associate minister for 5 of the years that I was the senior minister at the congregation in Appleton, Wisconsin. She is one of the wisest, most resilient people I have ever met. Our 5 years of working together spanned a really crucial transition in the congregation as it grew from a mid-sized to a large-sized congregation. And Dottie, more than anybody, helped me retool and reinvent my ministry to work in a large church. And it's Dottie who incidentally introduced me to Reverend Victoria. Part of Dottie's resilience and wisdom is embodied in a saying she often quoted: simply say what's true. Simply say what's true. This guides her through life's difficult moments and conversations. Simply say what's true, of course, can be misused. I think of a friend of my kids who would volunteer unsolicited opinions prefaced by, no offense, but your shoes are ugly. No offense, but wow, do you stink at math? Well, this is not the way Dottie used simply say what's true, and she never, ever prefaces it with no offense, but. She uses the saying skillfully, in the same way that Buddhists talk about practicing compassion or mindfulness skillfully. For her, simply saying what's true is a deep spiritual practice. I asked Dottie this week to share with me a little more about this practice, and she sent to me the reading that we heard Sarah recite a few minutes ago. Simplicity, patience, compassion. These 3 are your greatest treasures. Simple in actions and thoughts, you return to the source of being. Patient, with both friends and enemies, you accord with the way things are. Compassionate toward yourself, you reconcile all things in the world. You see, skillful truth sharing is expressed simply, and it comes from a place within of patience and compassion. These 3 greatest treasures, simplicity, patience, and compassion, these are what guide Dottie in this practice. So here's an example of how this works. Imagine you are in a significant relationship with someone you love, a partner or other family member or dear friend, someone whose addiction is making a mess of their lives and maybe making a mess in your life too. For many of us, me included, this is actually not an exercise in imagination. It is an exercise in memory or in our current life. Stories of people in recovery often include a sort of turning point moment where a loved one simply says what's true, and for whatever reason, the addicted person hears it. When this happened, these truth-sharing moments, I think, are expressed simply and from a place of patience and compassion. A sort of nuanced view of patience here is in, I desperately want you to embark on a path of recovery right this instant. And I know it's a long, hard journey. The story that Amy shared a few moments ago provides another example of simply, patiently, and compassionately saying what's true. This is exactly what the Zen teacher does after breaking the moment, the energy of the moment, by filling that teacup with too much tea. Well, I have found simply saying what's true is a really useful tool in interim ministry. I feel like I did this for the 25 years I was a minister with a congregation in Wisconsin, but in hindsight, I realized I kind of watered down the truth sometimes. There was that pesky little thing of being worried about my job and keeping that job that maybe helped that happen. Well, as an interim minister, I am pre-fired. When your board chair and I sat down and finalized a contract last spring, we agreed that there is no scenario whatsoever where I would stay beyond this interim ministry. Most likely, I will be here for 2 years, or at this point, actually, 1 year and 50 weeks. I want to add a caveat to all this, which is that when I simply say something that's true, whether in working with you as an interim minister or elsewhere in my life, I'm telling you what's true in my head and my heart. And I might be mistaken. Indeed, with some regularity, I am reminded of my ability to make mistakes. Today, I want to share 4 things that I think are true about White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church at this moment. These 4 things feel really important to say up front. Now remember that caveat I just said. I might be wrong, and I have only been here 2 weeks. I hope you will hear these 4 things in a simple manner, and that you will find that they come from a place within me of patience and compassion. First, there is lots of grief here. So many of you are deeply, palpably grieving the departure of Reverend Victoria. And this loss is compounded by the departure a few months ago of your longtime choir director, Thaxter, and the upcoming departure at the end of next month of your longtime music director, Carol. Between Victoria, Thaxter, and Carol, there's going on 80 years of experience being with you in your church life. I suspect that for many of you, when you return to worship in this space, perhaps as early as September 12th, if you wish, the joy that you feel at being back in this beautiful space will be bittersweet. You will feel in a new, deeper, more real way an absence at the heart of White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. And so I am expecting there will be tears of joy and tears of grief. And I want to say this is all okay. In fact, it's good. It's good to feel grief and to let it out. Grief can be put off, but when we do, it often comes out sideways and destructively. I hope I can be a companion to some of you in your grief journeys here at White Bear. Maybe it goes without saying, but maybe not. I can handle your sharing grief with me, and I will never take your missing Reverend Victoria personally. And it's also important to say today that it's okay not to be grieving Victoria's departure. Victoria is an extraordinary minister. In fact, I think she is the best preacher in our UU movement. It's something I'm mindful of very much at the moment. But even with all that she did and how she did it, there are, I'm sure, a few people in this congregation who are okay with her leaving. At least that was the case when I left my congregation in Appleton. So if that's where you are, you don't have to pretend to be grieving. A second truth. Ideally, there's a balance in interim ministry between continuity and trying new things. It's generally helpful for a congregation to feel like everything isn't being turned upside down, especially for a church that's vibrant and really been on a roll, which is true here at White Bear. At the same time, it's good during interim ministry for people to stretch, to try new things, to get more skilled, because the more skilled you are at adapting, the better it's going to go when you have this really big adaptation ahead, adapting to the arrival of a new settled lead minister. Well, here's the problem. The continuity side of this balance is going to be impossible to achieve in the midst of this ongoing pandemic. When we are back in person in this space, the services will be different. We cannot create high quality, multi-platform worship that is both in person and virtual without making some changes to the service and the aesthetics. And it's going to be a work in progress. Today, we're taking steps towards September 12th, and there's some rough edges. That's just the way it has to be. And oh yeah, there's some things you really have loved about White Bear services, like singing hymns together. You're one of the few congregations in the UU world that actually does that well. And that's not going to be possible to do that for who knows how long. And so this is really all a difficult truth. And we will need an abundance of patience, of graciousness, of compassion with each other as we go through these next weeks and months. A third truth. As the Buddha, Heraclitus, modern physics all affirm, everything is always changing. We just heard those words beautifully sung by the choir, words written by Teresa of Avila. Change is the nature of life, and because of that, so is uncertainty. We never, ever know what lies for sure around the very next corner. Ministerial transition, music transition make this clearer in the church's life. And the pandemic is making it abundantly, painfully clear in all of our lives. And so with this pandemic, we have no idea where things are headed. The notion that many of us, me included, had last spring that somehow the end is in sight, that notion lies trampled by the Delta variant and fear about whatever variant is going to be next. And during such turbulent times, it's really nice to experience our church as a rock of stability. And unfortunately, that kind of rock solid stability is not possible at White Bear at the moment. You had Victoria for 22 years. You'll have me for a couple of years, and then you'll have a new lead minister. This is a season of change here, even as COVID continues to rock this church and everything in our lives. This is simply where we are. And a final truth. Our American Unitarian Universalist movement has found an excuse to back away from becoming more anti-racist, more anti-oppression, every single time we've begun to focus on this work. Every single time. For decades, indeed for centuries. And the pandemic is giving this still largely white UU movement another excuse to back away from this work that we've begun to focus on over these past several years. And here at White Bear UU, the ministerial transition is giving another excuse to back away from this work. But friends, I don't think we can afford to back away from anti-racism, anti-oppression work yet again. If we do, I am convinced that the American UU Church is doomed to become forever a white ethnic church, and I believe it will be gone 100 years from now. I believe this is really our last real chance to make some serious, lasting progress toward becoming a beloved multicultural faith community. We need to do this work. We cannot put it off any longer. Returning to my friend Dottie, this week she also shared an image with me that she uses in the spiritual practice of simply saying what's true. It's the image of Kuan Yin, the bodhisattva in the Chinese Buddhist tradition who embodies compassion. Dottie talks about how utterly grounded Kuan Yin appears in this image, fully holding her seat and full of equanimity, but also her heart characteristically wide open, always. She always speaks her truth from a place of calm clarity. Now, of course, none of us are bodhisattvas, including my friend Dottie. But holding this image in our minds can help us channel at least a little bit of Kuan Yin in the way we share the truth. May we strive to share truths with our beloveds with simplicity, with patience, with compassion. May we strive to embody Kuan Yin at least a little bit in our relationships at the church and everywhere in our lives. May it be so. And I invite you now to join together wherever you are in singing Spirit of Truth, of Life, of Power, number 403, in Singing the Living Tradition.
Spirit of truth, of life, of power, we bring ourselves as gifts to thee. Oh, bind our hearts this sacred hour in faith and hope and charity.
Please join me in the closing words. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our will and love of truth forever guide us.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I hope you will join us at 11:15 in just a few minutes for our cyber social hour. I'll close the service today with a sign of peace from sign language. To me, it has the feeling of the challenges, the tumult, the difficulties in life, and then finding even within them serenity. May you go in peace.